My name is Alora Bush. I'm 27, an architect living in Portland. Everyone thinks Bush and Son Designs belongs to my brother, but 82% of the firm's award-winning projects were drawn by me. At the celebration this morning, Dad raised his glass to our family legacy. Mom smiled proudly, and I stood there, clapping like a guest. Then came the email. The entire company, valued at $12 million, was officially transferred to my brother's name. I smiled, but inside something snapped. If your own family erased you from everything you built, would you forgive them or make them remember? I didn't sleep that night. My phone kept lighting up with congratulations from clients who thought I was part of the big family moment. Every text was another reminder of how well the lie worked. Around 2 a.m., I scrolled through the company website again, looking for a trace of my name, but it was gone, like I'd never existed. My apartment was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the faint traffic outside. I opened my sketchbook, the one I'd carried since college, and stared at the first page. It was a drawing of our family home, the house Dad built when I was 10. Back then, he'd call me his little helper, letting me trace over his pencil lines. I thought it meant we shared something sacred. Now I realize it was training not to build, but to stay silent. By morning, I decided to confront him. I arrived at the office before everyone else. The sunlight poured through the tall glass panels I had designed myself, every angle precise, reflecting the skyline I once admired. Dad's office smelled like cedar and coffee, his desk spotless except for one framed photo, Liam shaking hands with the mayor. He looked up when I entered, frowning. "You should have called." "I saw the email," I said. "You transferred the company. It's a restructuring, Alora, for efficiency." "Efficiency?" My voice trembled. "You erased me from my own work." Dad leaned back in his chair, calm as ever. "This is business, not art class. You're talented, but you don't have the head for management. Liam does. He doesn't even know how to read a stress load chart. Lower your voice." His tone turned sharp, cold. "You're emotional again. This is exactly why you never trusted me." I cut him off. "Why you told clients I was your assistant, why my designs win awards under his name," he sighed. "You're my daughter. Everything I do is to protect you." "From what?" I asked quietly. "From being visible?" He didn't answer. I turned to leave before my tears could show. Outside, I heard him say to his assistant, "She'll come around, she always does." But not this time. When I reached my desk, Liam was already there, spinning in my chair like a bored teenager. "Dad told me you're upset," he said, smiling. "You know this is just paperwork, right? Get out of my chair." "Relax, sis, you'll still get your paycheck. Think of it as less pressure." His smirk made my hands shake. I wanted to scream, to throw every rolled-up blueprint in his face, but instead I said, "Enjoy it while it lasts." He laughed, not knowing that I meant it. At lunch, Mom called. Her voice was sweet, deliberate, the same tone she used at charity luncheons. "Alora, darling, your father told me you're overreacting again. Can we please not make this dramatic?" "Mom, he transferred the company?" "It's temporary," she interrupted. "You've always been too sensitive about these things. Why can't you trust your family?" "Because my family stopped trusting me a long time ago." That evening, I packed my things quietly. No one noticed when I left the building. Outside, the rain had started, thin, misty, the kind that blurs everything but the city lights. I sat in my car, hands gripping the wheel, watching water streak down the windshield like veins of glass. I thought of every sleepless night, every sketch, every moment I'd chosen silence. And then I whispered to myself, no more. At home, I backed up every file I could find, drafts, contracts, correspondence. I copied them onto an encrypted drive and labeled it Blueprint Truth. The name felt like oxygen. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of what would happen next. I was afraid of what I'd do if I didn't fight back. When dawn broke, the city outside my window was still soaked and gray. But in the reflection of the glass, I saw something I hadn't in years, my own face, steady, awake, and done pretending. I woke up to the sound of rain hitting my window, soft but relentless, like the city itself was trying to remind me not to fall back asleep. My eyes burned from the night before. My laptop was still open on the desk, the folder Blueprint Truth glowing faintly on the screen. I clicked it once and the list of projects filled the page, 58 files, each one stamped with my initials buried deep in the code. Proof that I had existed, proof that I mattered. For the first time, I wasn't looking at them as memories, they were evidence. At 8 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Liam," I let it ring until it stopped. Then it rang again. This time, I picked up. "What do you want?" I asked. He chuckled. "Good morning to you too. Listen, Dad's worried you'll do something stupid. We can talk about this, just come in today." "Why? So you can tell me I'm overreacting again?" "Alora, we're family. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "Harder?" I laughed, a bitter, sharp sound. "You took everything, Liam. You don't even know how to hold a pen right, and somehow the city thinks you built their skyline." He paused, voice tightening. "You think this company ran on your sketches alone? You'd be nowhere without Dad." "Maybe," I said quietly, "but at least I'd be me." I hung up. For a long time, I just sat there, watching the phone screen fade to black. The rain kept falling, steady and cold, but something inside me had started to move, like gears grinding back to life. I spent the rest of the morning combing through every email I had ever sent from my company account. It felt like rummaging through an attic full of ghosts. I found revisions, drafts, meeting notes, each line carrying my voice, my words, my decisions. Every file they'd used to build their legacy was mine. By noon, I had everything backed up. That afternoon, I went for a walk downtown, past the high-rises that carried our firm's name. Bush and Son Designs. The letters looked bold against the cloudy sky, but all I could think about was how fragile they really were. The people passing by didn't know my story, they just saw another polished brand. But if they knew the truth, if they saw the real architect behind those walls. I stopped at a coffee shop, the kind where the baristas remember your order after one visit. The girl behind the counter smiled. "Double espresso, right?" "Make it a triple," I said. I sat by the window, scrolling through architecture forums on my phone. That's when an idea started forming, quiet at first but steady, like the foundation of a new building. If they wanted me to disappear, I'd reappear somewhere they couldn't touch. Under my own name. My own vision. No shadows this time. When I got home, I registered a new domain, abdesignlab.com. I didn't tell anyone. I just sat there staring at the confirmation email, the letters AB glowing back at me. That night, I started sketching again, really sketching. Not for clients, not for awards, but for me. My hands moved without hesitation. I designed a small modern studio space with tall windows and an open atrium. I imagined sunlight pouring through, walls lined with models, the sound of pencils scratching paper. I imagined freedom. Around 2 a.m., I uploaded my first design submission to an international competition in London. The form asked for a firm name. I typed AB Design Lab. For the first time, my initials weren't hidden inside someone else's files, they were the headline. The next morning, I sent a polite email to the HR department of Bush and Son. Effective immediately, I resigned from my position. It felt strange to press send, like closing a door I'd spent years trying to open. But the second the message whooshed away, I felt something unclench in my chest. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't owe them an explanation. Later that day, I got a text from Mom. "Your father says you're making a mistake. Don't do anything you'll regret." I typed, deleted, and typed again before replying. Maybe regret is better than pretending. No response. I took my sketchbook and walked to the waterfront. The Willamette was calm, gray, and endless, just like the sky. For years, I'd dreamed of designing something right here, a building that would reflect the river perfectly, like water meeting glass. I promised myself that one day I'd build it, not for their name, but for mine. And as the wind whipped through my hair, cold and sharp, I whispered the truth that had been waiting for years to escape. They built a company, but I built myself. 2 weeks passed before anyone from my family spoke to me again. Silence suited them. It had always been their favorite weapon. No shouting, no apologies, just the kind of cold distance that said, "You'll crawl back eventually." But I didn't. Every morning, I woke up early, brewed black coffee, and worked at my tiny kitchen table. The apartment was small, but it was mine. The walls were bare except for one sketch pinned above my desk, a minimalist house with open beams and a glass atrium. I called it the Untitled Project. It was everything Bush and Son would never approve of: bold, asymmetrical, imperfect. I poured myself into that design for hours, letting the noise of the city fade into nothing. For the first time, I didn't have to worry about someone else signing my work. Every line was mine, every choice deliberate. Then one morning, an email popped up in my inbox. Subject: "Congratulations, shortlisted, London Design Week." I blinked, reading it twice. They had chosen my submission. Out of thousands of entries, AB Design Lab was in the top 10. My name, my real name, was going to be printed in an international catalog. I laughed out loud, startling myself. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the screen, trying to process what it meant. I hadn't just survived without them. I was winning. By afternoon, the excitement dimmed into nerves. Winning could also mean exposure. If my family found out, they'd try to control the narrative again. I knew exactly how it would go. Dad would call it a joint success, Mom would call the press, and Liam would find a way to stand in front of the camera. So I decided not to tell them. Not yet. That night, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello?" Alora Bush, a man's voice said. This is Mark Evans. I used to work in legal for Bush and Son. Congratulations on the London shortlist. My stomach tightened. How did you? I recognized the design, he said. That cantilevered atrium, classic Alora. I knew it was you. Are you calling to congratulate me or warn me? He hesitated. Both. Mark explained that Liam had filed a new patent application last week, using my concept as part of a larger city project proposal. The firm was trying to get government funding under his name. I felt my pulse hammer in my throat. He's stealing from me again? I'm afraid so, Mark said. But this time, you've got something they don't, your time-stamped files and public recognition from London. If you want to fight, you can. I stared at the screen, my reflection flickering in the dark. I want to, I said quietly, but not yet. I spent the next few days researching copyright law, saving copies of everything, setting up secure backups in the cloud. Every click, every upload felt like laying bricks for the foundation of something bigger, something that wasn't just revenge but justice. On Friday, Mom called again. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the better of me. Alora, we need to talk, she said softly. Your father is very upset. About what? You left your job, you're spreading things online. This isn't the image we built for the family. The image you built? I repeated. Do you even hear yourself, Mom? Sweetheart, she sighed, you've always had a dramatic streak. You're making enemies where there don't need to be any. I'm not making enemies, I said. You and Dad already made them the day you decided my work didn't deserve a name. Stop, she whispered. You're not thinking clearly. Oh, I'm thinking clearly for the first time in years. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing on the line, sharp and shallow. Then she said, We didn't erase you, Alora, you walked away. I wanted to argue, to scream, but instead I just said, Keep telling yourself that. Then I hung up. That night, I poured all of that fury into my next design, a public library shaped like an open hand, each finger a curved glass tower symbolizing knowledge and freedom. When I finished the last line, I whispered, This one's mine too. I sent it to an architectural magazine under my real name again. Days later, the editor replied, We'd love to feature your story. Anonymous female architect challenges her own family's legacy. Are you open to an interview? I froze. This was the moment. The truth could finally come out, but truth had consequences, and once spoken, it couldn't be taken back. I stared at the cursor blinking on my screen for a long time before typing, Yes. Let's talk. When I pressed send, I felt my heartbeat steady, slow, certain. The silence my family built around me was about to break. The interview was scheduled for Monday morning at a small studio downtown. The editor, a woman named Kara, greeted me with a warm handshake and an even warmer smile. We don't usually do personal stories, she said, adjusting her recorder, but yours feels bigger than architecture. It's about recognition, identity, legacy. Legacy. That word used to make my skin crawl. I nodded, sitting across from her. Ask anything you want, I said. For the first time, I told my story out loud, the stolen credit, the erased name, the ownership transfer. Kara barely interrupted, just took notes, her eyes sharp and empathetic. When I finished, she exhaled. They'll come after you for this, you know. I know, I said, but I'm done being scared of them. When the article went live a week later, it spread faster than I expected. The headline read, The Invisible Architect, Alora Bush, the woman behind Bush and Son Designs. My inbox flooded overnight. Messages from strangers, students, even industry professionals, all saying they'd experienced something similar. Some shared stories of being overshadowed, silenced, or minimized in family businesses. Others simply wrote, Thank you for speaking up. But then the backlash came. Dad called first. Do you realize what you've done? His voice was low, dangerous. You've humiliated us in front of clients. You've destroyed the company's reputation. I didn't destroy anything, I said calmly. I just told the truth. Liam, been getting death threats? He shouted. You think you're the victim, but you've turned this into a circus. I didn't write those comments, I said, and maybe people are just seeing what's been hidden for years. He went quiet, and when he finally spoke, his voice broke. You're no longer my daughter. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. The words didn't hurt like they used to. They sounded hollow, like an old wall cracking under its own weight. Later that day, Liam sent me a message too. Congratulations, you finally got your 15 minutes. I deleted it without replying. By evening, the firm's website had quietly changed again. My name wasn't there, but a new section appeared at the bottom. We respect the contributions of all past designers. It was a pathetic attempt at damage control, vague, sanitized, soulless. The next morning, Kara called. Alora, your story, gone viral. The London committee just reached out. They want to move your project to the main exhibition hall. I nearly dropped my phone. You're serious? They said it represents courage in design and in life. I hung up and sat in silence, letting it sink in. My work wasn't just mine anymore. It had become a symbol for every person who'd ever been told they were too much or not enough. That night, I stood by my window, watching the city lights shimmer across the river. My reflection stared back at me, tired but alive. I thought of the younger version of me sitting in Dad's office, sketching quietly while everyone else took credit. I wanted to tell her, "You made it out. You made them see you." But part of me also knew the storm wasn't over. Families like mine didn't admit defeat, they regrouped. 2 days later, a formal letter arrived from the firm's legal team. It accused me of misappropriation of intellectual property and defamation. The irony made me laugh out loud. They were suing me for the work they stole. I called Mark immediately. "They've lost their minds," I said. "I saw the filing," he replied. "Don't panic, we can counter it. You have timestamps, drafts, original files, that's all you need. But Alora, this won't stay civil for long." "What do you mean?" "Your family's going to make this personal." He was right. The next day, photos of me started appearing online, candid shots, some from years ago, others clearly taken recently. My private life became a headline. "Daughter turns against family empire." Comment sections filled with strangers debating my motives. I tried to ignore it to stay focused on my work, but it got harder every day. My phone buzzed constantly with messages, some supportive, some cruel. One night, I opened my inbox and found an email with no subject line. Inside was a single sentence: "You'll regret this." No name, no address, just that. I stared at it for a long time, my heart beat loud in my ears. Then I deleted it, backed up my files again, and whispered, "You can't scare me anymore." When I looked up, the folder blueprint truth was still there, growing heavier by the day, like a secret waiting for its final purpose. And deep down, I knew that purpose was coming soon. 3 weeks later, I walked into the courthouse for the preliminary hearing. The marble floors gleamed beneath my heels, and the echo of footsteps followed me down the long hall. Reporters waited outside, their cameras flashing the moment they saw me. "Alora, do you have a statement? Did you really design the Redwood Tower? Are you suing your own family?" I didn't answer, I just kept walking. My palms were sweating, but my spine felt straight for the first time in years. Mark met me by the courtroom doors. He handed me a folder, his expression calm but tight. "We've got everything we need, timestamps, drafts, CAD logs, just stick to the truth. That's all you ever had to do." Inside, my family was already seated. Dad looked older than I remembered, his posture rigid but fragile. Mom avoided my eyes completely, pretending to scroll through her phone. Liam, in his tailored suit, gave me a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. The judge entered and we stood. The case began. Their lawyer, a slick man in a gray suit, painted me as an unstable ex-employee with a grudge. "Miss Bush," he said, "you were compensated for your contributions. Isn't it true you willingly signed away your rights when you joined the company?" I met his gaze. "It's true I signed an employee agreement, but I never signed away my name or my authorship." He smiled thinly. "Authorship, Miss Bush, is a vague term." Mark stood. "Not in this case, Your Honor. We have embedded metadata, version histories, and electronic signatures, all showing that my client, Alora Bush, created these designs." He clicked the remote and the courtroom lights dimmed. On the screen, my blueprints appeared one by one, projects I'd poured my life into. Each drawing glowed with my initials hidden in the code. The room went silent. Dad shifted in his seat. Mom's hand trembled as she reached for his arm. Liam's jaw clenched. When the lights came back on, the judge turned to their side. "Do you have any counterproof?" Their lawyer hesitated. "We require additional time to review." It was the first time I'd ever seen my father look cornered. During recess, I stepped into the hallway to breathe. My legs felt weak, but the air was different, lighter, almost electric. Mark came beside me, smiling faintly. "You did good in there." "Thanks," I said, voice shaking. "I just kept thinking about all those nights I stayed up fixing their mistakes." He nodded. "This isn't over yet, but today they saw you." That night when I got home, I sat by the window with a cup of tea and watched the city lights blur through the glass. My phone buzzed again, another unknown number. I almost ignored it, but then curiosity won. "Hello," a woman's voice answered softly. "Alora, it's me." It took me a moment to recognize it. "Mom?" "Yes," a long pause. "Your father doesn't know I'm calling. I read everything in court. I saw those blueprints." I didn't speak. She sighed. "We made mistakes. I made mistakes. I thought I was protecting the family, but maybe I was just protecting your father's pride." "Mom," I whispered, "you helped erase me." "I know," she said, voice breaking. And I'll live with that, but Alora, he's sick. He hasn't told anyone yet. Please don't destroy him completely. I closed my eyes. He destroyed me first. She didn't respond. I heard her breath catch before she hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at my reflection in the window, torn between fury and something that felt like grief. The next morning, the papers ran the headline, "The court leans toward designer in Bush case." My inbox flooded again. Some messages celebrated me, others called me ungrateful, selfish, vindictive. I tried to ignore them, but one line from a stranger stuck in my mind. "You're proof that silence is the most dangerous blueprint of all." That day, I knew what I had to do next. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about reclaiming every inch of space I'd been denied. I called Mark and said, "I want to launch a foundation, something for women in architecture, the kind who never get to sign their work." He smiled through the phone. "That's poetic justice, Alora." "No," I said quietly. "It's just justice." The trial dragged on for another month, but the outcome was inevitable. The evidence was overwhelming. The court ruled that Bush and Son Designs had falsely claimed my intellectual property, and the firm was ordered to issue public acknowledgement and financial restitution. When the verdict was read, I didn't cry. I just felt a strange, weightless calm. Outside, reporters swarmed me again. "Alora, any words for your family?" I looked into the cameras and said simply, "The truth builds faster than lies." That evening, I walked home alone under the fading light. The air smelled like rain again, just like the day it all began. And for the first time in years, the city didn't feel like something I had to survive. It felt like something I had built. The morning after the verdict, I woke up to quiet. Not peace, just quiet. It was the kind of silence that pressed against your skin, the kind that reminded you how long you'd been holding your breath. The city outside my window was gray, the Willamette River still half hidden under fog. I sat on the couch, cup of coffee untouched, watching the steam fade. The court had given me everything I asked for: the recognition, the financial settlement, even a public apology from Bush and Son. And yet I felt hollow. Mark called mid-morning. "You alive over there?" "Barely," I said, my voice hoarse. He laughed softly. "It's over, Alora, you won?" I stared at the blank TV screen. "Then why doesn't it feel like winning?" "Because you lost something you can't sue for," he said. "Family." I didn't answer. He was right, but I wasn't ready to admit it. After he hung up, I opened my laptop. The news had already spread everywhere. The invisible architect triumphs in court. Bush legacy in ruins. Daughter exposes family empire. My inbox was chaos: journalists, architecture students, old classmates. People I hadn't heard from in years suddenly wanted to celebrate my courage. I closed it all. For the rest of the day, I drifted between cleaning and staring out the window. I tried sketching, but the lines felt empty. For so long, I'd been drawing buildings to escape. Now that the cage was gone, I didn't know where to go. Around dusk, my phone buzzed. Mom. I hadn't saved her new number, but I knew the way she texted: formal punctuation, no emojis. "Your father's in the hospital, congestive heart failure. He wants to see you." I froze. My heart didn't know whether to ache or harden. I typed and deleted 3 replies before writing, "I'll think about it." That night, sleep didn't come. I kept seeing his face in court, stiff, proud. The color drained from his skin when the judge said authorship belongs to Alora Bush. For a moment, he'd looked less like my father and more like a stranger forced to meet the version of me he'd spent years denying existed. The next morning, I drove to the hospital, not because I forgave him, but because I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. Room 317 smelled of antiseptic and wilted flowers. Dad lay there, tubes in his arms, eyes half closed. Mom sat beside him, her hand limp on his blanket. When she saw me, her face softened in a way I hadn't seen since childhood. "You came," she whispered. "I'm not staying long." Dad's eyelids fluttered. When he saw me, his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, not quite a frown. "Alora," he rasped, "you won." I didn't want to win, I wanted the truth. He coughed, the sound wet and small. "Truth costs more than money." I almost laughed. "And lies are cheaper." Mom tried to stop me, but he lifted a hand weakly. "No, let her speak, she earned it." The silence that followed was unbearable. Finally, I said quietly, "You taught me to build things that last, Dad, but you built our family on denial. It was bound to collapse." His eyes met mine, tired, regretful, but still proud. "The company, it needed a name people trusted." "Then you should have trusted mine." We didn't hug, we didn't reconcile. I left before visiting hours ended, and as I walked out of the hospital, I realized something. I didn't need his approval anymore. The blueprint of my life didn't have to include him. 3 days later, Mark and I met for coffee to finalize some post-case paperwork. He slid a folder across the table. "Here's the transfer of rights and settlement breakdown. but there's something else. He pulled out a thin USB drive. These files came from the court's subpoena. Internal communications from Bush and Son. You should read them. I frowned. What's in them? Emails, project archives, things their legal team didn't expect to become public. I skimmed a few, and well, you might want to sit down for this. I opened my laptop and plugged in the drive. The first email was from 5 years ago. Subject, confidential, partnership adjustment proposal. From Harold Bush to corporate counsel ensure that all intellectual property under AB is registered under Liam Bush. Delete local backups. Update metadata timestamps. She won't notice. My stomach twisted. I scrolled faster, more messages, same tone. Mom copied on half of them. She had known. She helped. Every illusion I had left shattered in one click. Mark watched my face, expression unreadable. I'm sorry. I exhaled, hands shaking. So it wasn't just him. It was both of them. He nodded. They covered each other. That's how it lasted so long. I closed the laptop slowly. You know what this means, right? What? It means the court only saw half the truth. He leaned forward. Alora, no, I said. They erased me on purpose. This wasn't a business decision. It was theft, and it was personal. They wanted me to doubt myself until I disappeared. Mark sighed. What are you going to do? I looked at the USB. Finish the story. That night, I sat in front of my computer until sunrise, reading every email, every file. Each message was another betrayal, another blueprint of deceit, dates, signatures, false invoices. I realized my family hadn't just stolen my work, they had rewritten my entire professional history. Projects that had shaped my career, the Redwood Tower, the Eastbridge Plaza, the Skyline Greenway, all had been systematically altered to erase me. By 3 a.m., my tears had dried into anger. I created a new folder, Blueprint Resurgence. This time, I didn't hide it. The next morning, I called Kara, the editor who'd first published my story. I have something new, I said. Something bigger, she hesitated. Alora, are you sure? You already won. Going after them again could destroy what's left of the firm. Good, I said. Then they'll finally understand what it feels like to lose everything they built on lies. Kara was silent for a moment. If you're doing this, you'll need to show proof. Oh, I have proof, I said. I have their words, their signatures, their plans, every piece of it. That afternoon, I started sorting files, organizing timelines, writing down key dates. It felt like designing a new building, only this time the structure wasn't made of steel or glass. It was made of truth. By the end of the week, Kara's investigative team had everything. They planned to release it as a 3-part exposé, the blueprint heist inside the family that stole its own architect. When the story went live, the impact was immediate. Clients withdrew contracts. The firm's board demanded Harold's resignation. Liam deleted his social media. My mother's charity events were quietly canceled. The Bush name, once printed on every glossy magazine, was now whispered like a warning. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even smile. I just stood at my apartment window, watching the rain streak down the glass, whispering to myself, this isn't revenge, it's restoration. But somewhere deep down, I knew the storm wasn't over, because justice had a way of pulling more secrets into the light, and I had just opened the first door. 3 days after the exposé went public, my name was everywhere again, but this time not as a victim. The headlines were ruthless. Bush and Son faces collapse after daughter's revelations. Architectural dynasty implodes under scandal. I didn't read most of them. The ones I did were enough to make me sick. People didn't just talk about the firm, they dissected my family like a reality show. The press called me a whistleblower, a rebel, a prodigy, a homewrecker, sometimes all in the same sentence. And every opinion, every think piece carried its own kind of venom. But underneath all that noise, something strange began to happen. My inbox filled with stories, other women, young architects, even interns from Bush and Son, writing things like, "You gave me the courage to speak." It was overwhelming, empowering, terrifying. Mark warned me to lie low. They'll try to turn the narrative again, he said. Harold might be out, but Liam is. He's scrambling for control. He wasn't wrong. The next week, a glossy press release appeared online. Bush and Son announces new leadership transition under Liam Bush. Described him as a visionary leader continuing his father's legacy, and ended with a line that made my blood run cold. Our company has always been a family affair. Family affair. The words felt like a blade. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened my old drafts, the first sketches I'd made after the trial, and started redrawing them. Every stroke was sharper than before, my hands moving with purpose. When I looked up, dawn was creeping in, painting the room in pale gold. I had an idea. At noon, I called Kara. What if we don't just expose them? What if we rebuild what they destroyed? She was intrigued. You mean start your own firm publicly? Yes, I already have the name, AB Design Lab. It started as an alias, but now it's real. I want to make it official. Hire people who have been overlooked, interns, juniors, women, anyone buried by family politics or old boys networks. Kara smiled through the phone. Now that is a story. We met later that week at her office. I brought mock-ups of my new projects: community housing designed for single mothers, a library that doubled as a shelter, a sustainable school in Eastern Oregon. You're changing the tone, she said. This isn't vengeance anymore. No, I said softly. It's evolution. Within 2 months, AB Design Lab became real, not just a name on paper, but a physical studio downtown in a small converted warehouse by the river. The space smelled like fresh paint and cedar, sunlight spilling through the windows. I hired 3 interns, 1 accountant, and an assistant who used to work at Bush & Son before being laid off. Her name was Maya, a quiet girl with sharp eyes and sharper instincts. From day one, she proved invaluable. She organized my schedules, tracked project bids, and knew the system better than I did. You have no idea how many people there hated what your brother did, she told me once. They were just afraid to speak. I looked at her. And you were. I'm afraid every day, she said with a shrug, but you showed us it's survivable. A month later, the London competition results were announced. I didn't win first place, but AB Design Lab received the jury honorary mention for authenticity and structural vision. For a small, new studio that was everything, the recognition brought clients, investors, and media attention. Suddenly, people wanted me at their tables. They wanted my designs, my voice, my story. I should have felt unstoppable. But part of me was waiting for the next hit. It came faster than expected. Late one Friday evening, I stayed behind after everyone left. The rain was falling again, steady and cold. I was reviewing budgets when Maya's Slack notification popped up. Hey, check your email, something weird in the archives. I opened it. An anonymous message with no signature, no subject. Only a single line and an attachment. They're not done rewriting your history. The file was a scanned document, an old project proposal from 5 years ago. But when I zoomed in, I froze. The document had my handwriting, my annotations, my sketches, but at the bottom, in the lead architect line, was a name I'd never seen before: Liam H. Bush & Associates. I searched online. It was a new firm, freshly registered 2 weeks ago, with Liam listed as founder and CEO. Its first press release claimed it had been the silent creative force behind Bush & Son's award-winning era. They were doing it again, this time not stealing my work, stealing my story. I felt my throat tighten, my vision blurred. I forwarded the email to Mark with one line: "He's rebuilding the lie." Mark called within minutes. "Alora, listen to me, don't go public yet. We need to find out who sent that file. It could be bait." Bait for what? For you to react. If you attack him too soon, it'll look like obsession, not truth. But patience wasn't my strength anymore. I reached out to a journalist I trusted, sent her the document, and told her to dig. She promised confidentiality. If this is real, I'll find the source. The next few days were agony. Every hour felt like a countdown. When the call finally came, it wasn't from the journalist, it was from Maya. "You need to come to the office," she said, voice shaking. Now. When I arrived, she was standing by my desk, holding a stack of printed emails. "I checked the metadata of that file," she said. "It came from a server still registered to Bush & Son. But there's more." She handed me one of the pages. It was a corporate memo from Liam's firm, instructing his team to use Alora Bush's existing portfolio as creative reference material under rebranding strategy. I felt my pulse in my ears. "He's using my designs again." "Yes," Maya said quietly. "Someone inside his company leaked this to protect you." I looked at her. "Who?" She hesitated. "They signed the email with one letter, just H, Harold." The name hit me like a stone. My father, the man who once told me I'd never survive without him, had sent me the warning. I didn't know what to think. Guilt, anger, confusion, grief, all collided inside me. That night, I sat by the window again, watching the city lights ripple on the river. For years, I'd wanted to make him pay. But maybe he already had. Maybe watching his son repeat his sins was punishment enough. Still, the architect in me knew one truth: structures built on rot always fall. And Liam's new empire, whatever he was building, was already cracking. The next morning, I opened my laptop, scrolled to the folder Blueprint Resurgence, and whispered, "Round 2. Then I started to build my counterplan, not with rage this time, but precision, because revenge wasn't a demolition, it was reconstruction. And this time, I wasn't drawing buildings. I was drawing justice. For a week, I barely slept. I lived on black coffee and adrenaline, my laptop never shutting down. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that new company name Liam H. Bush and Associates flashing behind my eyelids like a warning sign. He wasn't just copying me anymore. He was trying to overwrite me again. Mark came by the studio one night with takeout and that look on his face that said he thought I was about to do something reckless. You can't fight fire with fire, Alora. I ignored him, pulling up the database I'd been building. You ever wonder why Liam's firm got registered so fast? He got funding in under 3 weeks. I've been digging into his investors. He sighed. And you found what exactly? I turned the screen toward him. Bank transactions, corporate filings, shell companies. One name repeated across the transfers, LM Foundation. Mark frowned. Never heard of it. Neither had I said, until I traced its director. I clicked again and an image popped up, a corporate ID, clean and official. Director, Margaret L. Bush. Mark's jaw tightened. Your mother? Yeah, I said. She's bankrolling him. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air sharp. It made sense now, how Liam had started so fast, how the new office had top-tier contractors, how the media seemed ready for his launch. It was the same playbook they used years ago, just without me this time. Mark leaned back. You sure this is worth reopening? I laughed bitterly. You're asking me to walk away from the same people who tried to erase me twice. He looked at me carefully. I'm asking you not to let them erase who you've become. There's a difference. I didn't answer. That night, I met Maya at the office. She brought a thermos of coffee and a flash drive. So, she said, what's the plan? We're going inside. Her eyes widened. Into their network? Not hacking, I said quickly. Just collecting what's already public, contractor records, supplier invoices, email trails, everything leaves fingerprints. She grinned. Got it, ethical espionage. I can work with that. For the next several nights, the two of us poured through data, matching file timestamps and metadata. It felt like architecture again, only the structure we were mapping wasn't made of steel or glass but deceit. At 2 a.m. on the third night, Maya gasped. Wait, look at this. She turned her screen toward me. A contractor invoice from Liam's firm listed an equipment shipment addressed not to their downtown office, but to a warehouse 2 miles away, a facility owned by Bush and Son Designs. I blinked. They're sharing resources. Maya nodded. They're pretending it's 2 companies, but it's really one. Your mother been merging assets behind the scenes. It hit me like a wave. Mom wasn't just funding him. She was helping him rebuild the Bush legacy under a new name, laundering the firm's reputation through her son. Why? I whispered. Maya's face softened. Because that's what families like yours do. They can't admit they lost, so they repaint the walls and call it a new house. The metaphor stung because it was true. Mark joined us the next morning, coffee in hand, his tie undone. He skimmed through our findings, jaw tightening. If this checks out, it's not just unethical, it's criminal. They're misrepresenting ownership, transferring assets under a dissolved entity. That's fraud. Can we prove it? I asked. He nodded slowly. If we get those warehouse documents, but that means someone has to go there. I looked at Maya. She raised an eyebrow. You're thinking what I'm thinking. I smiled faintly. Road trip. The warehouse sat at the edge of the industrial district, half hidden behind a row of shipping containers. It looked abandoned, but the lights inside glowed faintly. Maya parked the car and killed the engine. You sure about this? No, I said, pulling up my hood, but I'm tired of watching from outside. We slipped through a side gate that wasn't even locked. Amateur move. Inside, the air smelled like dust and paint thinner. Rows of drafting tables, printers, and blueprint cylinders filled the space. Maya pointed to a stack of crates labeled Archive Transfer, LHB and Associates. She cracked one open carefully. Inside were folders stamped with the Bush and Son logo, some still bearing my handwritten notes. Oh my God, she whispered. They didn't even bother changing the labels. I pulled out one file. It was the original concept sketch for the Redwood Tower, my lines, my annotations, but now the signature line read Architectural Design Lead, Liam Bush. Something inside me snapped. I took pictures of everything. Every label, every document, every sign of fraud. Maya helped me pack them into her backpack until it bulged. As we turned to leave, I froze. A motion sensor light flicked on near the door. A security guard stepped out from behind a pillar, flashlight in hand. Who's there? Maya whispered, shit. I stepped forward slowly, hands raised. I used to work here, I just needed. He shone the light on my face. Recognition flickered. You're her, the architect from the news. Yes, I said, and if you don't want to lose your job, you didn't see me. He hesitated, then nodded once, lowering the flashlight. Be quick. We left without another word. Back in the car, Maya exhaled shakily. That was insane. Yeah, I said, still staring straight ahead. But we have what we need. The next morning, we handed everything to Mark. He spent hours cataloging, cross-referencing, building the legal thread. When he finally looked up, his expression had changed. This isn't just fraud, he said. It's a full-scale cover-up. Margaret used foundation money, charity funds, to finance Liam's firm. If this leaks, it's going to destroy her. I went silent. Mark studied me. You don't have to do this. You could walk away, start fresh. You've already rebuilt your name. But he didn't understand this wasn't just about my name anymore. It was about truth, about breaking the cycle that had started long before me. I leaned back, whispering, "She taught me everything about appearances. It's time the world saw behind hers." He nodded slowly. Then we do it right. No press this time. We go through official channels, the Department of Corporate Ethics. If you drop this anonymously, they'll investigate her foundation without linking it to you. Anonymous? I asked. After everything I've fought for? He gave me a small smile. Sometimes the loudest victories are the quiet ones. That night, I wrote the report myself, every date, every transfer, every lie. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke louder than my name ever could. 2 weeks later, the investigation began. The first to crumble was the LM Foundation, then the donors, then the press. By the time the truth hit the front page, my mother had resigned from every board she'd ever chaired. Liam tried to distance himself, claiming ignorance, but the trail led straight to him. And while the city watched their empire burn, I stood at my window, the rain streaking down like ink. This time, I didn't feel hollow. I didn't feel angry. I just felt free. Because for the first time in my life, I hadn't destroyed something out of vengeance. I'd simply removed the rot and left the structure standing on its own. It was the cleanest design I'd ever made, and the most honest. When the scandal finally settled, the city moved on faster than I expected. Scandals always fade, people get bored, the next headline replaces the last. But I didn't move on. I couldn't. I kept waiting for some sense of closure, for a final sound, a door slamming, a phone call, anything to mark the end. It never came. There was just silence again, and this time it wasn't heavy or hollow. It was strange, almost peaceful. Mom disappeared from public life. Every magazine she used to grace with her perfect smile quietly replaced her photos with new philanthropists, newer causes. The foundation dissolved, and with it, the illusion she'd spent decades curating. I told myself I didn't care. But when I saw her name trending with words like fraud and embezzlement, something twisted in my chest. It wasn't pride. It wasn't regret either. It was just grief for what could have been. Mark came by the studio more often after that. Sometimes under the pretense of checking paperwork, other times just to bring coffee. He teased me for my terrible eating habits or the way I lost track of time while drafting. It was easy being around him, quiet, steady, no expectations. One evening, I was working late when he stopped by with dinner. "You know," he said, setting down takeout boxes, "most people celebrate after dismantling an empire." "I'm not most people," I said, not looking up from my sketch. He chuckled. "Yeah, I've noticed." We ate in silence for a while, listening to the rain tapping the windows. Finally, he asked, "What's next for you?" I thought about it. "I want to build something that lasts this time, not just walls and glass, something that gives back, maybe scholarships for young designers." He smiled. "A redemption arc." I rolled my eyes. "It's not redemption, it's correction." He studied me for a long moment. "You ever wonder if correction can turn into healing?" I didn't answer. I wasn't sure I believed in healing anymore. After he left, I walked to the window. The river shimmered under the city lights, its surface broken by ripples of rain. I thought of my parents' house, the one that started it all, and for the first time, I didn't feel hatred, just distance. The next morning, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Miss Bush," an older male voice said. "This is Attorney Green. I represented your father years ago. I believe we need to meet." "Why?" "It concerns his estate," he said. "There's a document he wanted you to have." My chest tightened. "My father's still alive." A pause. "I'm afraid he passed last night." I didn't feel the ground vanish beneath me, not immediately. It was more like the air thickened until breathing became mechanical. I thanked him, hung up, and sat down. For a long time, I just stared at my hands. They were steady. That's what scared me most. Later that afternoon, I met Green at his office, a dim, quiet room filled with old leather books and the faint smell of tobacco. He greeted me with a small nod and handed me a thin, sealed envelope. "Your father wrote this a few months ago," he said. "He didn't want it released until after his death." My name was written across the front in his sharp handwriting, for Alora. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a handwritten note, and a photocopy of a legal document. The note read, "Alora, if you're reading this, it means I finally stopped pretending to outlive my mistakes. I know I can't ask for forgiveness, but you deserve the truth. When your mother and I founded Bush and Son, it was supposed to be Bush and Family. You were the one who gave it its soul. The reason I didn't name it that was simple, your mother didn't want you tied to it. She made me believe she was protecting you, that she'd create a separate trust in your name. I never checked. I was weak enough to believe her. When I discovered what she did, transferring your ownership and funding Liam behind my back, I started building something else. Quietly, it's not money, it's something better. Check the safe deposit box listed below, you'll understand." The bottom of the page listed an account number, a small local bank branch. I looked up at Green. "Do you know what's in it?" He shook his head. "Only that your father was very specific," he said. "It's the blueprint she was always meant to build." The next day, I went to the bank. The manager recognized my name immediately and led me to a small, private room. The box was heavier than I expected. Inside was a stack of neatly rolled architectural blueprints and a leather-bound notebook. I unrolled the first set and felt my throat tighten. It was a design, intricate, detailed, signed in my father's handwriting. The header read, "The Bush Center for Architectural Equality." It was a public institute, a mentorship and funding program for underrepresented designers, registered under my name as founder and executive director. He had built my dream before I even knew it existed. The notebook was full of letters of progress updates, sketches, notes addressed to AB. Every entry ended with the same line, "Maybe this is how I say sorry." For the first time in years, I cried without anger, just grief pure and clean. Later, when I told Mark, he listened quietly. So, he tried to fix it. "Too late," I said softly. "Maybe not," he said. "You can still make it real." I looked down at the blueprints again, the symmetry, the clean lines, the open space meant for classrooms and studios. It wasn't perfect. It didn't need to be. It was honest. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The way he'd written my initials. The way he'd believed I might finish what he couldn't. By dawn, I'd made up my mind. When the sun rose over Portland, I called the city council office. "This is Alora Bush," I said. "I'd like to discuss reviving a project, the Bush Center for Architectural Equality." The woman on the other end hesitated. "Miss Bush, that's your father's unfinished proposal, isn't it?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady, "but it was meant for me." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "We'll set up a meeting." As I hung up, I looked at the sketches spread across my desk, his handwriting beside mine, father and daughter, finally sharing a blueprint. For the first time, the word legacy didn't make me flinch. It made me hopeful. And maybe, just maybe, it made me forgive. The city council building smelled faintly of fresh paint and coffee when I walked in. It had been weeks since I'd stepped into a space that didn't already know my story. Here, I was just a name on a meeting agenda. A young assistant led me to a long, glass-walled conference room. "They'll be with you shortly, Ms. Bush." I set the rolled blueprints on the table and took a deep breath. The sunlight caught on the river beyond the window, and for a moment, it looked like the world was holding its breath with me. The door opened. 3 council members entered, one of them a woman I recognized, Chairwoman Devlin. She smiled politely. "Ms. Bush, thank you for coming. We reviewed your proposal. The idea of reviving your father's project is ambitious." "I know," I said, "but it's more than a project. It's a way to make what we did mean something." Devlin nodded, flipping through the folder I'd sent. "The Bush Center for Architectural Equality. It's an impressive concept, training, funding, mentorship. You're asking for city land and partnership. That's not small." "I'm not asking for charity," I said. "I'm asking for a chance to build something that outlasts a scandal." Another member leaned forward. "And how do you intend to fund it? The Bush estate is under review." Hesitated. "I'll fund the first phase myself. The rest will come from private donors." Devlin raised an eyebrow. "You have donors lined up." Before I could answer, a familiar voice spoke from the doorway. "She does now." I turned, heart seizing. My mother stood there, perfectly dressed as always, hair pulled back, pearl earrings gleaming. For a moment, no one breathed. Then she smiled, calm, elegant, as if the past year had never happened. "Good morning, everyone. I apologize for the interruption. I'm Margaret Bush, Alora's mother, and I'd like to support her proposal." The council members exchanged quick glances. Devlin looked at me. "Is this expected?" "No," I said flatly. Mom walked to the table, her heels silent on the floor. "I realize my name has been tarnished, but I still believe in what this represents. My husband started it, and my daughter should finish it. Let's not let pride destroy something that could help others." Her words were measured, precise, the same tone she'd used for years to control a room. I wanted to shout, to tell everyone who she really was, what she'd done. But there was something in her eyes, exhaustion, maybe fear, that made me pause. Devlin looked between us. We'll reconvene next week to review the partnership terms. Thank you both. As soon as the others left, the room fell into silence. What are you doing here? I asked. Mom sat down opposite me. I heard about the center. Your father left instructions for me too. Instructions? She nodded. He wanted me to help you, Alora, not financially, emotionally. I laughed bitterly. You don't get to use that word anymore. Her face softened. You think I don't know what I did, that I don't wake up every morning wishing I'd stopped him or myself? Then why didn't you? She hesitated. Because I thought I was protecting you. By stealing from me? By lying to my face? No, her voice cracked. By hiding the truth. Something in her tone made me stop. What truth? She looked away. You weren't supposed to know this. Your father wanted to tell you himself, but when the trial started, everything spiraled. The truth would have made you hate us more. Try me, I said. She took a slow breath. You're not biologically his daughter. The room tilted. What? He raised you as his own, she said quickly. But your birth father was someone else, a man I worked with before I met Harold. It was complicated. When I found out I was pregnant, Harold insisted he didn't care. He said love made family, not blood. But when you grew older and started showing talent, his talent, he became different, obsessed. He wanted to believe you were his creation. And I let him. I couldn't breathe. So every time he said I wasn't part of the family legacy, he was fighting himself, she whispered. He wanted to see himself in you, but he couldn't. And I stood by and watched because I thought silence would keep the peace. I stood up. You think this excuses what you did? That this makes sense of the years you both used me? Tears welled in her eyes. No, it makes it worse, but you deserve to know who you are. She slid a folder across the table, medical records, old photos, a single name highlighted in ink, Ethan Hale. The man who, your biological father, she said. He was an architect too, brilliant but unstable. He disappeared before you were born. I never saw him again. I stared at the folder, my hands trembling. For 27 years, I'd been defined by the Bush name, hated it, fought it, finally reclaimed it, and now it wasn't even mine. Mom reached out. I know this is a lot, but you're still my daughter. That hasn't changed. I stepped back. Everything's changed. I left the room before she could say another word. Outside, the afternoon air was cold and bright. I walked without direction until I reached the waterfront. The river glimmered like mercury, smooth and endless. My reflection stared back at me, a stranger wearing my face. Not his daughter, not even his blood. What did that make me? When I got home, I opened the folder again. Ethan Hale. The name sounded distant, almost fictional. But as I read through the records, a few photos, an old article about a promising architect who'd vanished after a workplace scandal, something inside me stirred. His sketches were there too, abstract, geometric, bold, and one of them looked eerily familiar, a design I'd drawn years later without ever seeing his work. My hand shook as I traced the lines. It was the same pattern, the same angles. Genetic memory, maybe, or something deeper. Mark came by later that night. The lights were still on, the folder open on my desk. What's that? He asked. My mother dropped a bomb, I said flatly. Apparently, Harold wasn't my father. He froze. You're serious? I nodded. There's a man named Ethan Hale, an architect, gone missing years ago. She says he's my real father. Mark sat down across from me, silent for a long time. Then he said softly, that explains a lot. Like what? The way you build, he said. The way you think, organic, unpredictable. Harold's work was rigid. Yours always had chaos in its structure. Beautiful chaos. I smiled faintly, tears threatening. So I inherited messiness. Perfect. He leaned closer. No, Alora, you inherited truth. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The city hummed outside, rain beginning to fall again, soft and steady. Finally, I whispered, I don't even know who I'm fighting anymore. He looked at me gently. Maybe it's time you stop fighting. But I couldn't, not yet. Because as much as I wanted to believe my mother's story, something about it felt incomplete, too rehearsed, too convenient. And deep down, I knew this wasn't the final truth. It was just the next layer. For 3 nights, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his name, Ethan Hale, written in my father's sharp handwriting, and my mother's trembling hands sliding that folder across the table. If it was true, then everything I'd built, every act of rebellion, every fight for recognition, was founded on a lie. I'd spent years trying to prove I belonged to a legacy that was never mine to begin with. By the 4th night, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I opened my laptop and searched his name. At first, nothing. Then, buried under years of unrelated articles, I found an old feature from the Oregon Architectural Review dated 1996. The headline read, "The Radical Mind of Ethan Hale." The photo made my stomach twist. He looked nothing like Harold. No gray hair, no tailored suit, just dark curls, ink-stained fingers, a reckless smile. His eyes, sharp, alive, the same shade of gray-blue that stared back at me in every mirror. I scrolled through the article. It described a rising architect who'd gained attention for his experimental designs, unpredictable, organic, defying symmetry. But the piece ended abruptly. Following allegations of professional misconduct and a mysterious disappearance, Ethan Hale's current whereabouts remain unknown. I dug deeper. The misconduct wasn't criminal, it was personal. A rumor that he'd fallen in love with a married client, Margaret Bush. My heart pounded. The timeline matched. My mother's job at the time, her consultancy with an independent architect, everything aligned. I closed the laptop and sat back, staring at the ceiling. My entire life had been built on stolen blueprints, first professionally, now personally. But the story didn't feel finished. People like him didn't just disappear. The next day, I drove to the archives of the Oregon Architecture Association. The receptionist recognized me instantly. "Ms. Bush, sorry, Ms. Alora, right. I read about your case." I forced a smile. "I'm looking for someone who worked here in the 90s, Ethan Hale." Her eyebrows lifted. "Oh, you mean Professor Hale?" The world seemed to tilt. "Professor?" "Yes, he teaches part-time at the University of Portland, architecture department, though he's semi-retired now. Lives somewhere near the coast, I think." My pulse hammered. "You're sure it's the same person?" She nodded. "Tall, quiet, talks about spatial ethics and legacy like it's poetry." "You can't miss him." When I walked back to my car, my legs felt unsteady. I sat behind the wheel for a long time before whispering out loud, "He's alive." The drive to the coast took 2 hours. Rain followed me most of the way, soft but constant, until the gray sky bled into the gray sea. I didn't know what I'd say if I found him, if I even wanted to find him. His name still didn't feel real in my mouth. Father. The address the university gave me was a small cottage tucked behind dunes near Cannon Beach. Driftwood fences, climbing ivy, wind chimes made of old drafting tools. The kind of home that belonged to someone who'd stopped trying to prove anything. I parked, walked up the narrow path, and knocked. The door opened after a long pause. He was older now, late 50s, maybe early 60s. His hair had thinned but still curled at the edges. His eyes, the same storm gray I saw every morning, narrowed in confusion. "Yes, Ethan Hale?" I asked. He studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Yes, and you are?" "My name is Alora," he frowned slightly. "Bush." The sound of it in his mouth made me flinch. "That's what they called me, but if my mother told the truth, it's not mine." His hand dropped from the doorframe. "Margaret," I nodded. "You remember her?" He let out a quiet laugh, soft, bitter. "How could I forget? She was chaos wrapped in silk." I didn't smile. "She said you disappeared." He looked away, out toward the gray horizon. "I had to. Your mother's husband made sure of it." I blinked. "Harold?" He nodded. "When she got pregnant, she told me she'd chosen him, said it was the only way to protect you. I thought she was lying until I got the threat, papers, lawyers, the whole machine. He said if I came near her again, I'd lose my license, my career, maybe more. So you just left." "I was young and stupid," he said quietly. "I thought staying away would make it easier for her. I told myself I was protecting you by being invisible, but I watched. Every article, every award, every headline, I saw your name, I saw what they did to you." My chest tightened. "You knew." "I knew," he said softly, "and I hated myself for it." I stepped closer. "Why didn't you reach out? You let me think I was worthless for years." His eyes filled with tears. "Because by the time I realized I should have fought, you'd already become stronger than I ever was." I didn't know how to respond. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. For a long time, we just stood there, the silence stretching between two lives that had never met but somehow shaped each other anyway. Finally, he said, "Come inside, please." The cottage was small but filled with light. Drafting tables, rolls of paper, books stacked on every surface. It smelled like cedar and salt. He poured tea while I wandered to a wall covered in sketches, wild, expressive structures that looked alive. One caught my eye immediately. It was a building shaped like two spirals intertwining, unfinished at the top. "That one," I said softly. "What is it?" He followed my gaze. "That's something I started 27 years ago, a design for a studio space. I called it the Spiral Daughter. I never finished it." I felt the air leave my lungs. He turned toward me. "Now that you're here, maybe I can." Something in me broke then, the part that had always needed permission to exist. I sank into the nearest chair, covering my face with my hands. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel erased. I felt found. He sat across from me quietly. "You don't have to forgive your mother or Harold," he said, "but you should know they weren't wrong about one thing you were born to build. That's not nurture, that's blood." When I looked up, his eyes were steady, almost proud. I whispered, "You watched me all these years?" He nodded. "From afar, I saw your court case. The interview. Center your planning. That's why I stayed hidden. You didn't need me anymore." Tears burned in my throat. "That's not true," he smiled faintly. "Maybe, but now that you're here, I'd like to help if you'll let me." I didn't answer right away. The sound of the sea filled the silence. Then I said, "I'm rebuilding something my father started, but I guess now I have two of them." He laughed quietly, shaking his head. "No, you only ever had one. The man who taught you to survive might have given you pain. But I." He paused, eyes softening. "I gave you the fire." I stayed until night fell. We talked for hours about architecture, about cities, about the invisible lines that connect people even when they think they're alone. He gave me the original sketches of the Spiral Daughter and said, "Finish it your way." When I left, the tide had risen high, washing over the sand. I stood by the car, staring back at the cottage. A single light glowed from the window, warm and steady, like a beacon I didn't know I'd been waiting for. As I drove back to Portland, I felt something shift inside me, not forgiveness, not closure, but balance. For the first time, I wasn't running from my past or chasing justice. I was building forward, and somewhere between the rain and the headlights, I whispered, "I know who I am now." The road curved along the cliffs, and for once, the horizon didn't look like an ending. It looked like a beginning. When I got back to Portland, the city felt different, cleaner somehow, sharper. The skyline that once reminded me of the Bush legacy now felt like raw material, waiting to be reshaped. The first thing I did was unroll the Spiral Daughter sketches on my studio table. The lines were wild and defiant like him, my father, Ethan. It still felt strange thinking of him that way, but in every stroke, every impossible curve, I saw a piece of myself. I spent the next few weeks sketching, merging his design with my father's final dream, the Bush Center for Architectural Equality. I didn't want to erase either man. One gave me form, the other gave me fire. Together, their blueprints could become something transcendent. Maya was the first to see it. She stood beside me, eyes wide, tracing the lines on the drafting board. "It's like it's breathing," she whispered. "Organic and structured at the same time, like rebirth." "That's the point," I said quietly. "It's not about revenge anymore. It's about what comes after." She smiled. "Then let's build it." We worked day and night, gathering the right people, engineers, designers, even a few interns who'd left Bush and Son after the scandal. They came not because of money, but because they believed in the story. In my story. Within months, the city approved the first phase of construction. The land Harold once fought for now bore my name. AB Design Lab was thriving, and the press couldn't stop talking about the Spiral project. But not everyone celebrated. One morning, I arrived at the studio to find an envelope slipped under the door. No return address, just my name. Inside was a photo, grainy, black and white, of me and Ethan standing outside his cottage. Scrawled across the bottom in ink, "You don't know everything about him." I froze, my heart raced. There was no signature, no clue, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. My mother's. That evening, I found her waiting in the lobby of my building. She looked smaller somehow, the perfection stripped away. No pearls this time, just a beige coat and eyes that hadn't slept. "I didn't mean to scare you," she said softly. "You could have called," I said, stepping aside. "I didn't think you'd answer." She was right. I led her upstairs. The moment she saw the blueprints laid across my desk, her breath caught. "You combine them," she whispered. "Ethan and Harold." "It's what they both started," I said. "What they couldn't finish." She touched the page gently, then looked up at me. "There's something you need to know before you build this." I folded my arms. "You've told enough lies for a lifetime, Mom." Her lips trembled. "This isn't a lie, it's the last truth I owe you." I didn't move, didn't speak. She took a deep breath. "Ethan didn't disappear because Harold threatened him. He disappeared because he asked Harold to." "What?" "They made a deal," she said, voice shaking. "When I found out I was pregnant, I told them both." Harold was furious, but Ethan, he was terrified. His career was collapsing, and he didn't want you dragged into it. He begged Harold to take care of you, to give you a stable name. He promised to vanish if Harold would claim you. I stared at her, disbelief clawing at my chest. "That doesn't make sense. He said Harold drove him away." "Because he wanted you to hate Harold, not him?" Her voice cracked. "He thought it would be easier that way." The air went still. I wanted to scream, to demand proof, but then I saw the look on her face. It wasn't manipulation this time, it was remorse. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because you're building something sacred," she whispered, And I can't let you do it based on half-truths. You deserve to know what kind of men they were. I felt dizzy. So Harold wasn't just my jailer, he was my protector. She nodded slowly. In his own twisted way, yes. The irony burned. All those years of hate, the lawsuits, the pain, built on misunderstanding and silence. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I was a coward, she said simply. And because deep down I didn't want to lose the version of you that needed to fight me. At least that way you still looked at me. I turned away, tears stinging. You don't get to make this about love. I know, she whispered. But you still have a choice. You can let this destroy you again, or you can build something neither of them could, peace. That night I drove to the construction site. The foundation was just being poured, the air filled with the scent of wet cement and rain. The floodlights cast long shadows, and for a moment I saw them both there, Harold and Ethan standing at opposite ends of my life. The man who claimed me and the man who created me. Two architects, both broken, both trying to leave something behind. And then there was my mother, the keeper of all the secrets that shaped me. Maybe they were all wrong. Maybe I was the only one who could build something honest from their wreckage. I stood there until sunrise, watching light spill over the site. The steel beams caught the sun like gold. For the first time, it didn't feel like a graveyard of old names. It felt like a resurrection. The next week, I invited the press to the official project announcement. The council gathered, cameras flashing. I stood on the podium, the microphone trembling slightly in my hand. Thank you for being here, I began. This project isn't just a building, it's a reconciliation. It carries the names of 3 people who built and broke each other, Harold Bush, Ethan Hale, and Margaret Bush, but it belongs to none of them. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I took a breath. It belongs to everyone who's ever been told they don't belong. To every voice that was erased, every design that was stolen, every child who had to fight for their own name. The crowd went silent. Cameras clicked softly. This isn't the story of a legacy, it's the story of liberation. Applause erupted, loud, raw, human. For a moment, I felt like the world tilted back into balance. But later that evening, when everyone had gone, I found a letter waiting on my desk. Handwritten, elegant, Ethan's handwriting. Alora, if you're reading this, your mother told you the truth. She's braver than I ever was. You have every right to hate me, but if you can, understand this. I didn't leave because I didn't love you. I left because I did. I thought disappearing would protect you from the chaos I carried. But I see now that you turned that chaos into something magnificent. You've built what we never could. And wherever I am when this reaches you, know this, you are the design I'm proudest of. I folded the letter slowly, my hands shaking. The ache in my chest wasn't grief anymore. It was release. Outside, the wind carried the scent of wet earth and steel. Somewhere far away, a crane groaned as the first beam of the spiral daughter rose into the sky. It wasn't just a building. It was my answer. The day the spiral daughter reached completion, Portland glowed under an amber dawn. The building rose like a living sculpture, glass and steel twisting in graceful defiance, catching sunlight in fractured rainbows. People called it the heartbeat of the new skyline. I watched from the observation deck as the final scaffolding came down. Maya was beside me, hard hat tucked under her arm, a grin stretched across her tired face. "You did it," she whispered. "No," I said, eyes tracing the spiral's crown. "We did it." It felt like closing a century-old wound. Every concrete layer buried a fragment of the Bush legacy, every beam lifted Ethan's dream higher. The media hailed me as the architect who rebuilt the city from her family's ashes. But for me, it wasn't fame. It was forgiveness solidified in steel. That evening, the grand opening filled the plaza. Reporters, council members, and architects from across the country gathered under strings of soft lights. The crowd hummed with excitement as music swelled, a subtle blend of piano and wind instruments echoing through the atrium. When I stepped to the podium, applause rippled like a wave. My heart pounded, not from nerves, but from the weight of what this moment meant. "This isn't a monument," I began. "It's a conversation between generations, between mistakes and redemption. The spiral daughter stands because we finally listened to the truth." I glanced at my mother in the front row. Her eyes glistened, pride and regret woven together. "Architecture," I continued, "is memory made visible, and tonight we build peace from what once was ruin." Thunderous applause followed. I smiled, but inside, something uneasy stirred, a faint vibration beneath my feet. The lights flickered. A murmur rippled through the guests. Then came a sound deep, metallic, like a creature groaning awake. The ground shuddered. "Is that—" Maya started, but the words were drowned out by a deafening crack. A steel joint from the upper spiral split, sending a rain of glass shards shimmering through the atrium. Screams erupted. Security rushed forward, guiding people out. "Evacuate!" I shouted, but my voice vanished in the chaos. Smoke poured from a ruptured generator. The scent of burning insulation filled the air. Someone screamed that the fire had reached the upper floors. I grabbed Maya's arm and pulled her toward the service stairwell. We stumbled through corridors painted with flickering red light. My lungs burned from the smoke. "This isn't possible," Maya coughed. "All systems passed inspection." My mind raced. Unless someone, I stopped mid-sentence, eyes widening. The photo, the letter, the secrets that never seemed to end. Was this another ghost from the past refusing to rest? We reached the emergency control room. I slammed the override switch, sprinklers hissed to life, but the flames were spreading faster than expected. Then I saw it, a maintenance terminal blinking manual override engaged. Someone had tampered with the fire system. My heart dropped. "Who else has access?" Maya shouted over the alarms. "Only the original design team," I froze, "and one engineer who worked under Ethan's name years ago." Before she could respond, a figure appeared through the smoke, helmet, mask, reflective vest. For a moment I thought it was a rescuer, but then he lifted his head. Even through the smoke I knew that face, older, weathered, but unmistakably him. "Ethan?" He lowered his mask, eyes hollow yet alive. "You shouldn't have built it," he rasped. The room tilted. "You're alive," he nodded faintly. "I never meant for you to find me." "Then why?" He looked past me, toward the monitors showing the upper floors engulfed in flame. "Because this building carries too much of us. It was never meant to stand." The foundation, Harold's foundation, was flawed. I tried to warn the inspectors, but they buried my reports. "You weren't supposed to build on that ground." My pulse roared in my ears. "You knew? You let this happen?" "I tried to stop it," he said. "But when I saw your name on the plans, I realized you repeat our sins. You can't fix what was built on lies, Alora." Maya stepped between us. "She didn't build it for legacy. She built it for truth." A deep rumble silenced us. The ceiling groaned, a massive beam tore free, crashing down. Ethan pushed us aside, the impact knocking him against the wall. He coughed, blood streaking his lips. "Go," he gasped. "Save her." I shook my head. "Not without you." He looked at me with a strange peace in his eyes. "You already saved me." Then the floor buckled. The last thing I saw before the smoke swallowed us was the spiral collapsing like a dying star. When I woke, everything was white, hospital walls, bandages, the world humming in sterile quiet. My mother sat beside the bed, eyes swollen. "Maya," I croaked. "She's alive," she said softly. "A few broken ribs. They said you pulled her out before the upper floors fell." I blinked slowly. "And Ethan?" Silence. The answer was written in her trembling hands. I turned toward the window. Outside, cranes hovered above the blackened skeleton of the spiral daughter. Smoke still rose faintly from the ruins. Reporters called it the night the city almost lost its rebirth. Others called it the curse of the Bush legacy. But I called it truth. For all their genius, both my fathers had built from ego. I had done the same until it cost me everything. Weeks later, I returned to the site alone. The ground was still scarred, the metal bent like broken ribs. But amidst the wreckage, a single steel beam stood untouched, its surface engraved with the initials AB. Maya joined me quietly. "They'll rebuild," she said. "The council already approved Phase 2. I smiled faintly. "Not like before, not a monument this time, something smaller, something alive." She tilted her head. "What will you call it?" "The Hollow Foundation," I said, "so no one forgets what happens when we build on silence." For a long time, we just stood there, wind threading through the ruins, the city humming beyond the horizon. And for the first time, I didn't feel haunted. I felt awake. The city called it the collapse, but for me, it felt more like a rebirth through ruin. Every headline, every interview framed it as a tragedy, yet when I stood in front of the wreckage, I saw something sacred, the first honest foundation my family had ever left behind. 2 months after the fire, the Portland City Council invited me back. I almost didn't go. The idea of stepping into another room full of officials and journalists made my stomach twist, but Maya insisted. "You can't disappear," she said. "You have to decide what this legacy becomes." So I went. The conference room was filled with cameras, microphones, and quiet whispers. Chairwoman Devlin greeted me warmly. "Ms. Bush, or should I say Ms. Hale?" she added gently. "Just Alora," I said. She nodded. "Alora, the council has reviewed the reports. The investigation concluded that the structural failure wasn't your fault. It was the result of a design buried in the original Bush Foundation blueprints, an error dating back to before you were born." The words hit harder than I expected. "So my father's mistakes destroyed my building?" "Maybe," Devlin said softly, "but you turned that destruction into something bigger. The public wants you to rebuild. Maya's hand brushed my arm under the table, steadying me. I took a deep breath. If I rebuild, it can't be the same. No towers, no glass monuments. I want a space that remembers what broke, not just what survived. Devlin smiled. The council would support that. We'd like you to lead the redesign, something symbolic of renewal. For the first time in months, the idea didn't terrify me. Then I'll do it, I said, but I'll need full transparency this time. No buried archives, no private investors. Every piece of the design stays public. Agreed, she said. When the meeting ended, the room erupted in applause. All I could think about was Ethan's voice in the fire. You weren't supposed to build on that ground. He had known, and yet he stayed to save me. That night, I returned to the site for the first time since the fire. The air still carried the faint metallic scent of ash. Floodlights illuminated the blackened steel ribs jutting from the concrete like bones. I walked to the beam engraved with my initials. Someone had tied a small white ribbon to it, weathered, frayed, but still there. I traced it with my fingers. Hey, a voice said behind me. Maya stood a few feet away, her arm in a sling but smiling. You're not supposed to be here alone. I needed to see it one last time before we start again. She walked beside me, looking up at the ruins. It's strange, even burned, it's still beautiful. Maybe beauty isn't what survives, I said. Maybe it's what we learn to live with. She gave me a long look. You sound like him. I smiled faintly. Which one? Before she could answer, her phone buzzed. She frowned, then handed it to me. You might want to see this. The text was from an unknown number, just one sentence. You didn't look in the right place. Attached was a photo, blurry, taken at dusk, of a shoreline cottage half collapsed from the storm. And in the doorway, a figure leaning on a cane, facing the sea. My heart stilled. Ethan, or someone who wanted me to believe so. I stared at the image until the pixels blurred. Where did this come from? No idea, Maya said. But the numbers from the coast. Cannon Beach. I laughed shakily. That's where he lived. Maya hesitated. Alora, if this is some scam, I have to see for myself. The drive felt different this time. The same highway, same gray cliffs, but every mile carried the weight of unfinished words. When I reached the coast, the wind had turned fierce, waves hammering the rocks below. The cottage was exactly as the photo showed, leaning, weather-beaten, the door hanging off one hinge. My pulse thudded in my ears as I stepped inside. Dust and salt coated everything. Drafting tables overturned, papers scattered across the floor. A faint smell of smoke lingered, not from the fire in the city, but from the hearth in the corner. Recently used. Someone had been here. On the table lay a single item, a small leather notebook. My breath caught when I saw the initials burned into the cover. EH. I opened it carefully. The pages were filled with sketches, spirals, bridges, shapes made of wind and light. The last page had a rough sketch of the spiral daughter in ruins with a note beneath it. Sometimes a structure must collapse to reveal its true form. If you find this, build what I couldn't, the space between forgiveness and truth. No signature, no date, but the ink was fresh. I stepped outside, the wind whipping my hair. On the cliff's edge, faint footprints led toward the rocks below and then vanished. I didn't know if he was alive or if this was his way of saying goodbye again. But standing there, I realized it didn't matter. He had given me the final design not for a building, but for peace. When I returned to Portland, I gathered the team. Maya, Mark, the engineers, the students. We spread the notebook sketches across the table. This is what we'll build, I said. Not a monument, a sanctuary. Maya tilted her head. For who? For everyone who's ever had to start over. The design was simple. Open gardens, learning spaces, quiet studios filled with light. No names on the walls, no signatures etched in steel. The central courtyard would hold the surviving beam from the spiral daughter, untouched, scorched but standing, a spine of memory. I called it the hollow foundation. When construction began, the city came alive again, not with spectacle but with purpose. Volunteers painted, students planted trees, people donated tools and time. Every day I walked the site barefoot, feeling the earth under me unshaped, honest. One afternoon, as I was leaving, a courier stopped me. Delivery for Ms. Alora, he said, handing me a thin envelope. Inside was a photograph. Ethan again, sitting on a bench by the water, sketchbook open, looking older but peaceful. No note this time. Just a postmark, Astoria, Oregon. I laughed softly, tears in my eyes. Of course you'd choose a place that still smells like the sea, I whispered. For the first time in my life, I didn't need answers. The dead didn't need reviving, the past didn't need rewriting. Some legacies are meant to fade so the living can finally breathe. Months later, when the hollow foundation opened, I stood in the courtyard under an endless sky. The beam still bore my initials, but someone had added another set beneath, EH. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. Maya joined me, holding a small sprig of ivy. "It's tradition," she said. "Plant something to mark the beginning." I took it from her, knelt by the base of the beam, and pressed the roots into the soil. "For all the things we couldn't save," I murmured, "and all the things we can." The wind caught the leaves, scattering them across the garden like tiny green prayers, and for the first time, I felt the ground beneath me was whole. The morning of the grand opening was cool and golden, the kind of morning that makes the city look freshly drawn. Dew clung to the leaves along the riverbank, and a gentle mist rolled off the water as if the world was exhaling in relief. I stood before the hollow foundation, the final version of everything that had come before. It wasn't tall or loud or meant to impress anyone. It was quiet, honest. The walls curved softly around a central garden where sunlight poured down through an open skylight, warming the stone floor. The scorched beam from the spiral daughter stood at the center, ivy already beginning to climb it. Around it were paths lined with native flowers, benches carved from reclaimed wood, and little pockets of space where anyone could sit, sketch, or simply exist. This place wasn't just architecture. It was apology turned into form. People began to gather. Former interns, city officials, students, and even strangers who had followed the story over the years. Mark was already coordinating with the press crew. Maya was checking last-minute details, her sling finally gone. The hum of conversation blended with the sound of wind chimes hung along the archway, made from leftover fragments of glass salvaged from the collapsed spiral. When it was time, Chairwoman Devlin took the stage. "Today," she said, "we dedicate not just a building, but a beginning. The hollow foundation reminds us that the most enduring structures are built from truth." Then she stepped aside and gestured toward me. Applause rippled softly, polite but warm. I took the microphone, my heartbeat steady this time. No fear, no ghosts. 3 years ago, I began, I stood in front of another building, taller, louder, meant to erase the past. That structure fell, and when it did, I thought it took me with it. A hush fell over the crowd. "But sometimes," I continued, "collapse isn't the end. It's the start of seeing what was hidden beneath, the cracks, the rot, the lies we were taught to stand on. And when you finally clear that debris, you find space to build something true." I glanced toward the front row. My mother sat there, quiet and still. No pearls this time, just a simple gray dress. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time there was no battle in them, just understanding. "I used to believe that blood defined legacy," I said. "That to matter, I had to carry my family's name, their approval, their rules. But legacy isn't inheritance, it's intention. It's what we decide to create when no one's watching, when no one believes in us yet." I paused, taking in the faces, the students, the workers, the old guard who'd once dismissed me. "This foundation isn't perfect," I said softly. "It's built on everything that broke me and everyone who taught me what to rebuild. For that, I'm grateful." Applause rose again, fuller this time, but I barely heard it. My eyes stayed on my mother. After the ceremony, when the crowd drifted toward the garden, she approached me slowly. For once, I didn't feel the urge to run. "You spoke beautifully," she said quietly. "Thank you." She looked around at the space, the way sunlight played on the water, the way people moved easily between silence and laughter. "It feels peaceful." "It's supposed to." A small smile touched her lips. "You know, your father would have loved this." I met her eyes. "Which one?" Her smile faltered, then returned, bittersweet. "Both." For a moment, we just stood there. Two women linked by the same wreckage, breathing the same new air. "I never told you," she said finally, "but after the collapse, I went back to that old house. I found some of Harold's letters, drafts he never sent. Most were angry, controlling, but there was one that was different." She handed me a folded piece of paper. "He wrote it the day he saw your first design published." I hesitated before opening it. The handwriting was familiar, rigid, but careful. "Laura, you'll never read this, but I want to believe one day you might. You are better than the name I gave you. If my silence ever made you doubt your worth, know this, the only thing I built right was you. I read it twice before I could breathe again. Why didn't you show me this sooner?" "Because I was afraid it would break you," she said. "But you're not breakable anymore." I folded the letter, tucking it into my pocket. "Maybe I never was." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'm proud of you, Alora." Truly, for the first time in my life, those words didn't sound like currency. They sounded like release. We hugged, awkward at first, then real. She smelled like rain and old paper, the scent of endings turning into beginnings. When she left, I walked into the garden alone. The sun had climbed higher, catching the beam in a warm glow. Ivy curled around the metal like forgiveness made visible. I placed my hand on it. The steel was cool, solid, alive. In that moment, I felt all of them there: Harold's ambition, Ethan's passion, my mother's fear, my own defiance, all of it converging into something weightless. Maya found me there a few minutes later. You okay? I nodded. Better than okay, I think I'm done fighting. She smiled. Then what now? I looked around at the students sketching, at the volunteers planting more ivy, at the children laughing by the fountain. Now, I said, we start teaching others how to build. Months passed. The foundation became more than just a structure, it became a refuge. Classes filled with young designers who didn't fit the mold. Artists, builders, dreamers who'd been told no too many times. They called themselves the Hollow Cohort. Every week, I taught a session called Reconstruction. It wasn't about blueprints. It was about learning to build from the inside out. I'd start each lesson with the same line: a building doesn't need to be flawless, it needs to be honest. Sometimes, when the class ended, I'd linger in the courtyard. The beam stood tall, now wrapped in ivy and light. Birds nested in its hollows. Life had filled the emptiness. One evening, as I was locking up, I noticed a small package by the entrance. No label, no return address. Inside was a photograph, Ethan again, sitting on a beach with a child sketching beside him. No caption, just a short note written on the back. The spiral never ends, it just changes direction. I smiled. I didn't need to know where he was. It was enough to know he was living, that some part of him, and maybe of me, had finally found peace. Years later, the city would call the Hollow Foundation a landmark of healing architecture. But for me, it was never about the recognition. It was about standing in that courtyard every morning, feeling the sunlight hit the beam, and remembering that collapse doesn't mean failure. It means you finally stopped pretending. Sometimes, to rebuild yourself, you have to let the old structure fall. To tear down the names that never fit, the lies that held you up, the walls that kept you small. And when the dust clears, what remains, that hollow space, isn't emptiness. It's possibility. That's where real foundations begin. The wind moved gently through the garden, carrying the scent of cedar and new growth. I stood there one last time before closing the gates for the evening, watching as the sky turned a soft orange over the river. Behind me, the ivy rustled against steel. "Good night," I whispered, and for the first time in my life, the silence that answered me wasn't lonely. It was peace.